The preamble of the United States states this, of the U.S. Constitution states this: "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, secure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America." We're going to be focusing on the Beatitudes this morning. And the Beatitudes, in a way, are the preamble to the Sermon on the Mount and serve, in essence, as kind of a constitution for the Church of Jesus Christ. Now, this can depend on your perspective, how you perceive these. And one thing that kept coming through my mind all week was the emphasis of the word. We've all heard the Beatitudes. I would think we've probably all heard that term. But I wonder about the emphasis and if it was maybe more the be-attitudes instead of just beatitudes. And keep that in your mind when you hear these words from Matthew 5. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he sat down, the disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So Jesus heads up this mountain, but this is after he sees these crowds coming toward him. And if you wonder who's there, who's in these crowds, we need to back up just a little bit and see what's right before this passage, because Jesus had learned that his good friend, his cousin John, had been killed. And he's in Galilee now, and he's teaching. And what's happening there when Jesus is teaching and traveling all over Galilee is he's healing the sick, the lame, the blind, casting out demons, and fame, his events, the things that he's doing, start to become popular and well known. So his fame starts spreading outside of Galilee into the Decapolis and beyond there, even beyond Jerusalem and Judea, and people are starting to hear about this Jesus. So it's not only the lame, the blind, and the sick, and those who are possessed by demons that are in this crowd, it's also the people who are bringing them. But I think Jesus is paying particularly close attention to those who need help in this crowd. So this is who's gathered on the hill that day. And Jesus, just like Moses, Israel's leader, Israel's teacher, now Jesus, Israel's new teacher, climbs up this mountain and starts to teach the people. And what he's asking them to do, in essence, with these beatitudes, is to rethink things. It's kind of like Jesus is asking them to stand on their heads. Now let me explain that a minute. This week, I thought this was kind of funny. I had gotten a couple of different emails from friends with pictures included in them. And both of these emails that I'm referring to with the friends, different pictures, but both pictures were upside down in the email. Now, one of them was saved or sent as an attachment, so I was able to click and rotate the picture and then see it the right way it was intended to see and see everything that's going on in that picture. Now, the other one, on the other hand, I wasn't able to. So for me to really fully take in that picture, it was going to mean that I had to do one of two things. Either I would need to stand on my head in front of the computer, and I'm sorry, but it's been a long time since I've done that, and I knew I'd probably hurt myself. So I decided to take my laptop and just spin it around so I could see that picture. And Jamie was gracious enough when I asked this morning if anybody was able to stand on their heads. He was willing to give it a try up here, but I didn't want to see anybody else get hurt or knock a bunch of stuff over, so I decided to skip that. But if Jamie were up here standing on his head, his view or his perspective would be changed. It would be altered, would it not? And who would really be upside down? Would it be Jamie or would it be the rest of us? Whose perspective is correct, is accurate? And what Jesus is saying here with these Beatitudes is, this is really how I want you to be and how you are to act if you're going to be able to say you are blessed, because the world is going to tell you something completely different. And what he does is Jesus relies on this Old Testament Hebraic way of thinking, or this thought pattern, as he starts going through these Beatitudes. And he's relying to some degree on some of the Psalms. Perhaps you're familiar with these. Psalm 1 starts out, "Happy are those who do not walk in the paths or seek advice from the wicked. They do not walk in the paths of scoffers, but they search for the law." They meditate on the law day and night. And then we come to Psalm 42, and it's, "Happy are those who consider the poor, for they will be redeemed by the Lord." So he's picking up and using that pattern. But now when we see that word blessed, it's kind of a difficult word to translate in our language, because it means more than being happy. It means more than being joyful. So you're just going to have to try to think about that a little bit on your own. I can't go any further with it because it's such a difficult word to translate. But it means more than being happy. It's something different than that, and more than being filled with joy. And so he launches into these 8 Beatitudes, and the first and the eighth one serve as bookends. And you'll notice that they're more written in the present tense, where the 6 in the middle have a present and a future context to them. So here's what he's saying to them. "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." In other words, joyful are you who are spiritually bankrupt, who know that you need the Lord, that you depend on God, that you cannot live, that you cannot survive without God. "I lift my eyes to the hills. Where does my help come from? My help comes from God." And the world is going to tell us, no, blessed are you if you're self-sufficient, if you can do it on your own, if you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps and make it on your own. If we recognize that we are bankrupt and we are nothing without the help of the Lord, we are blessed. And it's to us that the kingdom of heaven belongs. In other words, we belong to God, and nothing can separate us from that love in Christ Jesus. And then Jesus goes on and he says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." And Jesus is very smart. He's putting these in a particular order where they follow this pattern where one just builds on the other and they keep going. Because if we realize we are spiritually bankrupt and we cannot do anything without God, then the things that break God's heart are going to be the things that break our hearts. And so, in what ways do we mourn? In what ways are we grieving? Are we sad? Yes, we are sad when things happen to people that we love or we're going through difficult circumstances. But what about when we read the newspaper or we're watching the news and we see all these things going on in the world that we know are not right? Are those things breaking our hearts, and do we mourn for things to be made right? And you know what? I'm reminded that in Revelation 21, one day, when God makes his home here among us, God is going to wipe away every tear from our eyes. There will be no more mourning, no more sadness, no more tears. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Joyful are you if you have a mild disposition. I think a lot of times we misunderstand that word meek. And if we describe somebody as meek, or if we're described as meek, I would dare say we probably take offense to that. Because a lot of times we associate that with someone who's timid, or who's wimpy, or who's mousy. And those people we look and we say, well, they never get ahead. They're always last in line or whatever. But that's not at the heart of what this beatitude is about. It's about having a mild disposition where you are able to keep yourself in check. You can bridle your tongue. You are able to restrain yourself in the most difficult of situations. Blessed are those who are meek, because you will inherit the earth. We are joint heirs with Jesus Christ. What a wonderful promise. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are those who crave doing the right thing. And how many times does the world tell us, just take that shortcut? Just put that in your pocket. Nobody's ever going to notice. Just if you take that from work, it's okay. They should have given you a raise anyway. No one's ever going to notice if you don't do that or if you do this. Everybody else is doing it. But just because everybody else is doing it doesn't make it right. Joyful are those who crave doing what's right. Blessed are those who are merciful, for they receive mercy. We love because God first loved us. And what's at the heart of this really is extending mercy and grace and forgiveness to everyone. And I think what happens is we'll look at people with blinders or with a certain lens, and we'll just say, you know what, but that person's not deserving of it. They don't deserve grace or mercy or to be forgiven. Joyful are those who extend it, even when we deem or think that person is undeserving. And it's about extending it to people who need it the most. We have received mercy and grace when we didn't deserve it ourselves. Are we willing to extend it to others when we feel like perhaps they don't deserve it either? Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Purity in heart. Are our hearts undivided in loyalty? Are they steadfast in seeking the Lord and only the Lord? That's at the heart of what Jesus is trying to get across in this one. And blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Wouldn't it be great to be in a situation or a place where there's no conflict? Where there really is peace? But we live in a sinful and fallen world, and people don't always get along, and there's conflict. But are we seeking to do our utmost to resolve that conflict? to be at peace with our brothers and sisters and live in right relationship with them. And this follows the blessed are those who are pure in heart for a reason. Because if we're undivided and we're seeking to love the Lord our God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength, then this makes sense to follow after that we would seek to be in right relationship with our brothers and sisters. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. When's the last time you've been persecuted? Or somebody's been pursuing you in a hostile manner when you have been trying to follow the Lord or do the right thing? Yeah. Because you know what? Doing the right thing and doing it in the name of the Lord is going to make some people upset. It's not always going to be well received. It's not. And people will make fun of you. People will come after you. And when they do, hopefully we'll respond as Paul did and consider these sufferings joy. For we belong to God, and nothing can separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus the Lord. And as I kept thinking about what Jesus was saying here, and what's at the heart of these Beatitudes, and this ideal of seeing the world in a different way, or representing the kingdom in a different way in this fallen and broken world, that I think sometimes it almost does require standing on our heads to gain a different perspective. Or perhaps maybe even spending time with people who have a different opinion or different views of the world. And this can be difficult. It can be so hard when people see things differently. And I want to read this story. This was actually in the New York Times yesterday. And it's written by Nicholas Kristof, and it's about his high school buddy. He said, "The funeral for my high school buddy Kevin Green is Saturday, near this town in Yamahill, Oregon, where we both grew up. The doctors say he died at age 54 of multiple organ failure, but in a deeper sense, he died of inequality and a lack of good jobs. Lots of Americans would have seen Kevin, obese with a huge gray beard surviving on disability and food stamps, as a moocher. They would have been harshly judgmental. Why don't you look after your health? Why did you father 2 kids outside of marriage? The acerbic condescension reflects one of our country's fundamental problems, an empathy gap. It reflects the delusion on the part of many affluent Americans that those like Kevin are lazy or living cushy lives. A poll released this month by the Pew Research Center found that wealthy Americans mostly agree that poor Americans today have it easy because they can get government benefits without doing anything in return. Lazy? Easy? Kevin used to set out with his bicycle and a little trailer to collect cans by the roadside. He would make about $20 a day. Let me tell you about Kevin Green. He grew up in a small farm a couple miles from my family's, and we both attended the same rural high school in Yamahill, Oregon. We both ran cross country, took welding and agricultural classes, and joined Future Farmers of America. After cross-country practice, I'd drive him home to his family farm with its milk cows, hogs, and chickens. The Greens encapsulated, if not the American dream, at least solid upward mobility. The dad, Thomas, had only a 3rd grade education and couldn't read, but he had a good union job as a cement finisher, paying far above the minimum wage, and he worked hard and made sure his kids did too. He had no trouble with the law. Kevin and his big sister Cindy, one of the sweetest girls in school, both earned high school diplomas. Kevin was sunny, cheerful, and astonishingly helpful. Amy Hint Any hint that something needed fixing, and he was there with a wrench. But then the dream began to disintegrate. The local glove factory and feed store closed, and other blue-collar employees cut back. Good union jobs became hard to find. For a while, Kevin had a low-paying non-union job working for a construction company. After that company went under, he worked as a shift manager making trailer homes. He fell in love and had twin boys that he doted on. But because he and his girlfriend struggled financially, they never married. Then, about 15 years ago, Kevin hurt his back and was laid off. Soon afterwards, his girlfriend moved out, took the kids, and asked for child support. The loss of his girlfriend, kids, and job was a huge blow. It knocked him to the dirt, says his brother Clayton, also a pal of mine. It destroyed his self-esteem. Kevin's weight ballooned to 350 pounds. He developed diabetes and had a couple of heart attacks. He grew marijuana and self-medicated with it, Clayton says, and he was arrested for drug offenses. My kids would see Kevin and me together and couldn't believe he had run cross country with me and that he wasn't 20 years older than me. Kevin eventually got disability benefits, but he was far behind in child support and punished by losing his driver's license, which made it pretty much impossible to get a job in a rural area. Disability helped Kevin by providing a monthly check that he desperately needed, but it also hurt him because he might have looked harder for a job if he hadn't been getting those checks, Clayton says. Yes, it's absurd to think that people like Kevin are somehow living it up. And after child support deductions, he was living on about $180 a month plus food stamps and a small income from selling homegrown pot. He supplemented this by growing a huge vegetable garden and fishing on the Yamhill River. 3 years ago, his sister Cindy died of a heart attack at 52. Then the doctors told Kevin a few weeks ago that his heart, liver, and kidneys were failing and that he was dying. He had trouble walking. He was in a lot of pain. He was worried about his twin boys. They had trouble in school and with the law, jailed for drug and other offenses. The upward mobility that had seemed so promising a generation ago turned out to be a mirage. Family structure dissolved and lives become grueling and shorter. Kevin wrote a will a few days before he died. He left his life savings of $3,500 to his mom for his funeral expenses. Anything left over was to be divided between his children, and he begged them not to fight over it. His ashes will be sprinkled on the farm. I have trouble diagnosing just went wrong in this odyssey from sleek distance runner to his death at 54. But the lack of good jobs was central to it. Sure, Kevin made mistakes, but his dad had opportunities for good jobs that Kevin never had. So Kevin Green, rest in peace. You are a good man, hard working and always looking for someone to help. Yet you were overturned by riptides of inequality. Those who would judge you don't have a clue. They could use a dose of your own empathy. This ties so well in with these be attitudes and what we're called to be as representatives of the Prince of Peace. This is why Jesus says immediately, he's talking to the same crowd, this is why Jesus says immediately after this, you are the salt of the earth. If the salt loses its saltiness, it's going to be tossed on the ground and trampled upon. If we lose this way of being, is what he's saying. If we lose this way of being, salt has lost its saltiness. What good is it for? And he also says that you are the light of the world, and that a light is not to be hidden under a bushel. It's to be put on a lampstand for all to see. This way of being is what we're called to be. And we see that to some degree exemplified in the life of Kevin Green. And I wonder, who did Kevin see these be attitudes exemplified in? Would you pray with me, please?